Lawyers/cops. What's the stupidest thing you've seen someone do to cover up a crime? Client was embezzling money from his engineering firm. Client actually had the money he had embezzled in his possession and could still return the money. He would have faced penal liability, but we could have pleaded him out to have served no more than a few months of probation. Under his circumstance, prison time was unlikely. Client does not believe our advice. Client believes he's going to prison. Client believes his best course of action is to return to his country of birth, Iran. The United States strictly prohibits transfer of technology which can be used for nuclear programs to Iran. I explain this all to client. Client tries to board flight to Iran. In his luggage is a programmable logic controller his firm had been subcontracted with the federal government to develop. I don't know why he was taking his PLC with him, but it was there when he was pulled off the airplane and stuggered and taken into custody. Client is now facing up to 20 years in federal prison for espionage and unlawful transfer of unclassified military technology to a hostile power. People, listen to your effing lawyers. Story 2. I knew a chick who robbed a house she was house-sitting for silverware and jewelry. She pawned it off at the closest pawn shop to the house, so she was caught right away. However, being the dope fiend she was, she poured bleach all over the house to, quote, get rid of her fingerprints. Instead of petty theft, she ruined the stairs and all the hardwood floors and paint on the walls and ended up with damages exceeding $10,000 if I remember correctly, which launched her well into new legal territories. There's a lot to unpack here in this short story. The petty theft, it is what it is. It's silly, but it is what it is. But then to compound your issues by ruining hardware by pouring bleach, thinking that bleach would eliminate your fingerprints. I mean, I hope while you're locked up, you learned a valuable life lesson about how to properly rob someone. Just kidding, don't rob people. Story 3. Katrina destroyed my cousin's house, so we took her in at just 21 years old. My cousin was an alcoholic and addicted to cocaine. This only came to light because she'd been stealing bottles of wine from the local gas station across the street. We found out because the same family had run the gas station for 30 years and the grandpa character was very, very good friends with my father. He actually called him out of concern. Tracy's been stealing wine, a lot of wine. At first, I think she's a rebellious young girl. I did not call the police because I respect her family, but I worry for her and cannot afford for her to take any more for free. Story 4. To all the shoplifters who think you're smooth, keep in mind grocery stores know what angle to put cameras at to perfectly capture people stuffing things in their pockets or down the front of their shirts. And in many cases, those cameras are higher quality than you think they'd be. I've had files where I can make a continuous film following someone around the store and out the door, then cross-reference the timestamp with the store receipts to show you paid for the mac and cheese, but not the 3 steaks in your pants. I can't believe I went to school for 7 years for this. Story 5. Not a criminal matter, but I worked on a child welfare case in which the parents were ordered to undergo hair follicle testing for drug use. So the father, not my client thankfully, shaved off all the hair from his body, even his eyebrows, but he said it had nothing to do with the drug testing. It's just something he wanted to do. I think the kid ended up with relatives, in case you were wondering. Story 6. I work on child welfare cases, and the stuff people do is absurd. Most of them take the road of yelling and or writing their congressman about unethical conduct when they get called out on their nonsense. I saw one parent come into the court in handcuffs from a situation that started with a simple report that her kiddo had an abscessed tooth that wasn't receiving attention. Most of those cases are fairly straightforward. The social worker talks to the parent, usually finds out the parent can't afford treatment, they get them hooked up with dental care assistants, ask if they need anything else, go about their merry way, and close the case. Well, the social worker showed up at the house because the phone number in the report was disconnected. Parent threw a rock at the social worker through the front window, yelled that no one was home, grabbed the child, ran out the back door, sprinted down the street, and hid in someone's dog pen until the police found them. Then she tried to attack the police officer with feces and a stick and threatened to kill them as they hauled her off to jail. She was guilty of much more extensive abuse than the report was for. Last I heard, the kiddo was adopted by her aunt and uncle. Story 7. There is a guy who went to his buddy's house after nearly beating his girlfriend to death. Police end up showing up to the house where the guy was. Friend answers and buddy shows up behind the guy not wearing a shirt. This is important. Police say who they're looking for and both men say they don't know who that person is. Here's the kicker. The guy that's shirtless, who beat his girlfriend half to death, has his first initial and last name in a big bold tattoo across his chest. Story 8. Not either of the specified parties, but I work alongside both. There was this story a while back about a murder that just baffled me. This lady's husband had a fight with her and then disappeared. She said he went to Florida, angry, and told her to sell all his stuff and get a divorce. So she sold all his stuff, the house, etc. I think she may have gotten the divorce too, simply because he was unavailable for contact at any time. No emails, calls, etc. were answered. Of course, there were suspicions of foul play. Nothing came of them for a while, though. The lady sells their marital home and buys a house in a slightly more upscale part of town. After something like 7 years, the cops finally get to search the place. They found her husband in the closet. She had chopped him up into pieces, put those pieces into Tupperware containers, and wrapped those containers in alternating layers of scented trash bags and dryer sheets, along with air freshener beads, in order to keep anyone from smelling him. Why the hell would you hang on to dead husband bits for so long? We live by the sea. She could have just pitched them out there at any time and bam, nobody knows. Story 10. A guy I worked with was being charged with dangerous driving following a pursuit involving a police helicopter. He would have faced a fine and a 1-year driving ban. His lawyer told him to plead guilty. He ignored this advice and insisted on going to trial, and his sole defense was that the police didn't have any kind of video recording proof of his crime, as though this was some kind of technicality that would get him off. In questioning, he even admitted to what he did, but still tried to convince the court that he was not guilty because there was no video recording. The court threw everything at him, barring a prison sentence, got a suspended one instead. The arresting officer even told him he would just get a telling off if he stopped, but his insistence on trying to play the system ended up majorly screwing him over. Story 11. This is more of a failure to cover up, but I had a client who drove across the country to try to collect a drug debt. The police found the handwritten budget he had made for the trip. Items 1 and 2 were gun and bullets. Never underestimate the power of a good paper trail. Once it's in writing, that is the ultimate way to incriminate anyone of anything they say they did or did not do. Story 12. Just happened last night. My work in a college town. Around 2:30, the bars close and the parade of drunk students commences. Kid had one traffic cone on each arm and one on his head, walking jauntily down the main drag. As soon as I pulled up next to him, he started doing the robotic drunk guy acting sober walk. Carefully put the cones down on the sidewalk and kept walking as though nothing had happened. Forgot about the one on his head, though. Story 13. I dealt with a guy once who had burned his parents' garage down. He had been drunk driving, hit a cyclist, and hurt them. Driving ban, fine, maybe a suspended prison sentence given he had never been in trouble before. He was only 19 years old. But in his drunk mind, he decided that police couldn't prove he had been drunk driving if there was no car, but he had parked the car back at home in the garage. So he effing well set the garage on fire with a can of petrol. Destroyed the garage, the car, the side of the house, the mobile home parked on the driveway, and a large portion of his neighbor's garden. Still got charged with drunk driving, amongst other things. Story 14. A female distant family member got involved with an older guy, and together they kidnapped a guy to rob him, stole his car, murdered him, and then drove to a remote place where they doused the car in gas and lit it on fire. The boyfriend got burned on his hands. They arrested the girlfriend when she was shoplifting bandages and burn salve from the drugstore. The whole thing fell apart from there. They may have gotten away with it if she had bought the stuff for under $10. Story 15. Well, according to the full confession I got to read as part of the arraignment papers, someone allegedly got all his co-conspirators and accessories to agree to penetrate the dead girl's private part, post-mortem, to be redundantly clear, with a makeshift dildo and then pour bleach all over her genital region. The idea was to make it seem as though the murder had been subsequent/consequent to a SA, which it hadn't actually been, which the perpetrators had then attempted to cover up by destroying any lingering physical evidence. You know, to throw people off the trail. If that doesn't sound quite logical to you, congratulations. You might not be an unmedicated schizophrenic with terrible taste in friends. Story 16. I wasn't a cop or a lawyer at the time. I was 8, but I think you guys will love this story. My mom worked at a school for teenage boys. One day, one of them decided he was going to buy a pound of plastic explosives from the internet, using the school computers. Then, for good measure, he fesses up to my mom when the rumors go around that there is some kind of bomb at school. Now, my mother knew that this boy was not malicious in any way, just an idiot with too much money on his hands. So he calls up the chemistry teacher, who was Polish and rotund, and had already been in trouble several times for exploding things in his classroom. Dr. Explodia decides that the best course of action is to smuggle the explosives and the idiot student out of the school, take him to a field that the student's family owned, and perform a controlled detonation. He said I could come along too, since I was an 8-year-old that loved explosions and seeing people get in trouble. So anyway, the stupidest thing I've seen someone do to cover up a crime is tell everybody in authority what they did and then explode the evidence with an 8-year-old as a witness. Story 17. My nephew robbed a liquor store during a snowstorm in the middle of the night. He didn't have a car, so he had to walk. All the cops had to do was follow his footprints back to his house. He also stole $500 from my parents, and he hid the money in his ass. He was the only person in the house during the crime, so it couldn't have been anyone else. My parents demanded the return of the money, and he complied. That was a pretty crappy thing to do. Story 18. He was carrying a small butterfly knife, which is illegal. He tried to hide it by swallowing it. Had to lean him forwards and frantically hit him on the back to dislodge the damn thing as he turned blue. It's like a $100 fine, and you lose the knife. So he ended up in much more trouble, but in the end, he got off with a larger fine and a real talking to from a judge. Bloody twit. Story 19. My sister is a Sergeant LEO that used to work in robbery. She shows up to court to be present for the case where a guy is on trial for robbing a bank. They have him on camera and he wants to represent himself, no lawyer. His opening line is, "Yes, Your Honor, I'd just like to point out that you can't tell that was me on camera because I was wearing a hat." Yeah, that was a fast trial. Story 20. Not a cop or a lawyer, but a few months ago my friend called me asking for advice. She was with a friend of hers and they had weed on them, and for an unrelated reason got into an altercation with local police. The cops were coming for her car, so she told her friend to hide the weed in her pants. The girl puts the bag of weed in her underwear, I guess, and when the cops came, they could smell weed and were pretty much like, "Alright guys, just give it up." But they were both vehemently denying they had anything on them, and one of the cops was all, what's sticking out of your pants?" And the girl argues that she's on her period and it's her pad. She was wearing leggings, and it was obvious. They clearly didn't buy it and could see something stuffed there. And after about 20 minutes of arguing, they were pretty much like, "You either take it out now, or we arrest you, go downtown, and strip search you." The girl got a weed ticket. TLDR. Friend of a friend tried to hide weed in her undies. Cops could see it, ended up getting a weed ticket. I applaud the police for having this back and forth discussion for 20 minutes when it's clearly visible in what's going on. So yeah, a weed ticket is probably best case scenario for these young ladies. Story 21. Small town in Arkansas. The pharmacy is in a rock building with a tin roof. Some guys who steal crap figure out with a crowbar they'd get right in. And they were right. So they threw the drugs into the back seat instead of the trunk. They stopped to get gas and are just about to be on their way. A state trooper is headed to the same station to take a leak and get coffee. The guys play it cool. They start the car and floor it. Burned rubber nearly crash getting on the highway. Being an experienced trooper, this sparked his curiosity, so he hits the lights and begins pursuit. Finally gets them stopped, and once he sees the pile of pill bottles, he has some idea about what may be going on. Hauls them to the county jail and is inventorying everything when the sheriff says the local pharmacist is on the phone, so he may as well talk to him. Pharmacist wants to report a burglary. Trooper asks did they take and begins reading the inventory. Pharmacist says that sounds right. Trooper says, well, I think I solved it. Story 22. Obligatory not a cop or anything, but a clever ruse that 8 to 10-year-old me would go off without a hitch. It was the school holidays and I was up late playing video games when I decided I was thirsty. Wandered over to the fridge to find there was nothing to drink except the beers my dad kept in the fridge. So what do? I have me a beer, but then realize he's going to notice when there's one less bottle out of the 6 or so already in there, so I start panicking. Decide the best idea is to fill the empty bottle back up with effing water and put it back in the fridge with the lid screwed back on as best I could. About a week later, my dad hit me up about obviously fake beer, and I just claimed ignorance until he couldn't contain his laughter, how stupid the whole situation was. I cried, and we moved on as a family. Dad of the year right there. How can you possibly be mad in a situation like this? That's just too funny. That's too funny. The pain that OP felt and the shame from crying at the end and moving on, lesson learned, but let's not Let's not cry over spilled beer in this case. Story 23. Client was accused of embezzling millions from a company. This was simply false. The company owner had been hiding it from his spouse. The owner's lawyer called me up to extort my client and told me that if our client testified as to facts XYZ in support of his defense in the divorce, that they would appreciate it. If my client would not perjure herself, they would have her prosecuted. I recorded the attorney and filed a transcript along with a motion with the court. The judge brought down the hammer and he was professionally disciplined by our state licensing authority for attorneys. Story 24. This is a true story. When I was in ADA, a colleague of mine had a case where a couple of guys robbed a jewelry store. The police showed up and there was chase. They all split up and got caught, but one of them had a bit of a head start. Apparently, he ran into a beauty salon and started yelling that he needed to dye his hair immediately. And then the police ran in after him. Oh, and there is also the guy who stole jewelry out of someone's house and shoved it up his ass when he got caught. They found it during the strip search because some of it was still hanging out. Finally, there was a guy wanted for murder. He had a long ponytail, and a few days after the murder, he cut it off and got his head shaved. When he was arrested, he still had the ponytail in his pocket. Story 25. When I was young and dumb, this girl we had staying with us walked up to the store and called the police on me for hitting her. Although I did not hit her. I fell a bit backwards when I got up because I was drunk. I was 19. I went and hid in an empty storage container in the basement, but got worried I was going to get caught there, so I went and hid behind a door. Of course, the first place cops look when they go into a room is behind the door. Then I tried to resist, ended up getting carried out with one cop on each arm. As we approached a door that led to the stairs out of the building, I decided to try to push off the door to try to get the cops to fall backwards. I got maced instead, and an added charge of resisting. I would have probably just got a MIP, but I made it much worse. Story 26. The police suspected a woman to have something to do with drugs, so they kept an eye on her. They used the same car for 2 weeks. Woman noticed it and called the police because she thought she had a stalker. So 2 police officers visited her and found the cannabis she was growing in her house, which is illegal here. Tip for growing cannabis: do not call the police to your house. Tip for stakeouts: do not use the same car for 2 weeks, especially in an area where there are not too many cars parked on the street. Story 27. Not a lawyer/cop. Saw a guy get arrested across the street from the ED. His defense was, "No, officer, I don't do drugs. This weed ain't for me, I just sell it, man." Apparently he thought selling was legal, but doing it wasn't. Moved himself up to a felony, though. Story 28. Not a cop or lawyer. Had 2 kids I knew from high school kill a guy, chop his head off, and burn his fingers. They were caught. It was national news. The worst part? One had a house party 2 weeks before they killed the guy. He was drunk and pissed me off, so I gave him an upper decker. A mere 2 weeks before savagely murdering somebody. Story 29. I read this police report my first week in the prosecutor's office. Still makes me laugh every time I think about it. Some guy was pulled over for having a taillight out. The police officer had no reason to suspect he had anything illegal on him. He was just going to write a ticket and be done with it. Guy is convinced that the officer knows he has heroin in the car. His idea to cover up how crime of possession is to just start doing the heroin while the cop is in the car writing the ticket. Officer walks back, sees the guy snorting heroin, says, "What are you doing?" The guy replies, "Heroin." Moral of the story: don't cover up your drug possession by doing drugs in front of a cop. Story 30. When I was in high school, we had a yearly scavenger hunt with a bunch of dumb and silly things to do, one of which was doing a fire in the hole. We did this at our local Burger King, and right after, we went to the Kroger across the parking lot to continue the hunt. The police showed up not long after. We were under 18, so we just got taken to the police station and called our parents. We felt stupid for being the only group that got caught, but while we were waiting, a senior from another group came in with handcuffs on. He got naked and jumped on a car, stopped at a light in front of his car. There was a cop 2 cars behind him. Also, one of the things on the hunt list was to steal a garden gnome and put it in front of the police station. So it was pretty funny seeing about 10 different gnomes with evidence tags in them while we were calling our parents. The cops got a good laugh out of it too. Edit. I should have explained. Fire in the hole is ordering a drink in drive-thru and tossing it back at them. No explosives were involved. Story 31. Lawyer here. Not quite covering up a crime, but still stupid. I had a case where the other party was trying to claim that my client had no rights to a vehicle they bought together during their marriage. To support his claim, he told the judge that he had already married in another state when he married my client, thus making their marriage invalid. So it's just his truck, not hers. Not only is he incorrect legally, but he admitted, under oath, on the record, to committing a felony for which he was already under investigation, all for a beat-up old car, which the judge promptly awarded to my client. Story 32. I knew a lawyer, she was not my client, who blew the statute of limitations on a low-dollar personal injury case. Instead of informing her firm, she got the client to agree to settle for $40K, faked up the settlement paperwork and gave him $40K, that she embezzled from her church. She was the treasurer. That came to light. She paid back the church, she had the money, pled out to a misdemeanor, and was disbarred. Story 33. Cop here. Truthfully, most criminals are dumb, like real dumb. They do stupid stuff to try and escape consequences all the time and end up making it worse. I'll give you a few examples. What would have been a ticket for theft turned into multiple felonies when a girl tried to hide her ID in a shopping bag that she used to steal stuff by stuffing it into my back seat. It was a plastic sack. They're not quiet. She had the longest criminal history I'd ever seen. She gets caught a lot. I had a kid run from me in handcuffs after being picked up for a juvie probation warrant. He kicked out my back window, dove headfirst into the pavement before trying to jump a 6-foot fence, in handcuffs. He got halfway over. His shirtless half slid down the top of the fence, where I picked him up, with a bajillion splinters, and booked him for multiple felonies. If he just cooperated, he would have been home by lunchtime. I had a meth head steal Yoo-hoo, some Twinkies, and a Red Bull from a grocery store. She had over $1K in her purse. Security detained her. They called us and wanted us to issue a trespass warning, don't come back for 1 year, and escort her off the property. When she saw us, she decided it'd be a great idea to try and run, pushing people away and knocking down some random soccer mom. Now, instead of a warning, we have theft plus assault plus deadly equals robbery. This was all in the last month. Story 34. I work in a jail, walked into a housing unit and smelled weed. Followed the smell to the bathroom where there were 3 inmates standing in a corner. Dude with his back to me turns around real fast, with a face like a 5-year-old that crapped his pants, and puts his hands behind his back to hide what he's holding. I tell him to show me his hands. He showed me his right hand. I told him to show me his other hand. He puts his right hand back behind his back, then shows me his left. Both hands! He shows me a joint. Story 36. We responded to a break-and-enter one time and cleared the house. We go down to speak to the caller and tell her the house was clear and the only person we found was her sleeping roommate. She looks at us puzzled and says, I don't have a roommate. We ran up the stairs. One other time, a guy tried to rob a money mart with a knife. Now, money parent clerks are surrounded in about 5 inches of ballistic glass. Clerk says to him, is this a joke? Any criminal who breaks into a house or a car after 4 a.m. on a Sunday. We usually have nothing to do then, and are all waiting for this. You want to be a successful criminal? Do the crime at 2 a.m. Saturday. Another guy walked backward up to a bar door after it was closed to break in. He did this so he would not be seen by the camera. Grabs the door and pulls and the door handle comes off and he falls. Gets up and looks directly at the camera. You know, I would love to see a meme compilation of petty crooks and criminals looking at the camera and like realizing that they've either been caught or that they're being watched, kind of that oh crap moment. That would be kind of funny. Story 37. Was on shore patrol and got a call from a town 60 miles west of the base to pick up a sailor they had in custody. Dude was 5 minutes late from getting back from Cinderella Liberty, back on base by midnight, the night before. Seriously, the gate guard would probably have covered for him, but he freaked out. Police found him in the morning, bloody and locked in the trunk of his car. He claimed he was beaten and robbed. Cops saw right through his story. He had wrecked his own car, beaten himself with a tire iron, and locked himself in the trunk. Charged with filing a false report and obstruction on the civilian side, unauthorized absence, damaging government property, meaning himself, etc. on the military side. Story 38. It didn't involve police, but a funny story. Dude I know was selling cars. One of the perks he got was a demo car. He smoked a lot of weed. The cherry of bone he was smoking fell off and onto the white leather seats of a luxury automobile, leaving a burn hole. To try and cover it up, he tried using white shoe polish on the burn hole. Turns out the leather seats were an off-white and the shoe polish now looked like a streak of the wrong shade of latex paint. So now he tries to wash it off with rubbing alcohol. The shoe polish didn't come off, but the leather around it turned gray. The hole frayed and got bigger. Smoking in the car was a stupid thing to do in the first place. Everything he did made it worse. Story 39. Bank robbers thought it would be a good idea to paint their guns pink. This way, once they finished the robbery, they could wipe off the paint and the cops would be looking for guys with pink guns. Long story short, the cops found them, and when the guys willingly gave their guns to police so they could check them, the police noticed a drop of pink paint inside the barrel of a gun, effectively assuring them that they had the right guys. Even the judge during the sentencing for one of them went, "Wait, is this the case with the pink gun?" Story 40. The guy that used to come to the bar that I work at had a history of drunkenly just being a jerk to people. I guess his wife finally had enough and got a restraining order on him. He, of course, violated the terms and was put in jail. While in jail, he hired his jailmate to put a hit out on his wife. Bad idea, because his jailmate turned him in. Needless to say, he's sitting on some pretty hefty charges now in prison. Story 41. Not a cop or lawyer, but I worked at a restaurant a few years ago, and after I had left, the owner stopped paying the employees. They all showed up one day to demand him to pay them, and the owner called the police on them for trespassing at their place of employment. The police showed up and told him he had to pay them. Place shut down the next day. That guy was such a prick. Story 42. Our friends in college had a feud going on with the upstairs neighbors. We were drinking one night, about half of us were underage, and watching the World Series. There's a knock on the door, the cops show up, and we all scatter to the bedrooms just off the main room. None of us thought to shut the bedroom door. The cops ask our friend if anyone else is in the apartment, and he says no. The cops call him out, and the 21-year-olds come out from the first bedroom. Don't ask me why they hid. Cops ask again, and the soberest of the girlfriends comes out. Ask again, and just as we're all getting ready to come out of the bedroom with the open freaking door and take our tickets, the cops said, quote, "Quiet down and have a good night." So yes, I hid from the cops in a bedroom with the door open, and it worked. Story 43. Lawyer here. Guy posted incriminating crap on his Facebook. Somebody told him he was a moron for it, and he deleted it like an hour later and updated his non-private Instagram with the same photos because it's newer and lawyers and cops can't see it when you're not friends. He's in prison. Story 44. Insurance fraud investigator. Private here. I was working a case on a commercial/industrial electrician who said he couldn't work because a workplace injury destroyed his back and he could barely get out of bed. I put nearly 15 hours of surveillance on him before we even found where he was actually living. Address he gave the insurance company was his mom's place, and he wasn't actually living there. I find his new place, I get there pre-dawn, I settle in. These can vary widely. Sometimes you get a super active claimant right away. The bulk of cases are boring as crap, though with people either never leaving or only doing mundane crap that proves nothing. During the first half hour, dude comes out, gets in his car, and takes me for a drive. I follow him to Dunkin'. Then I follow him to a commercial job site in what I can best describe as a position that I could not have designed better. Surveillance isn't easy, and very often you can't find a good place to sit that gives you a clean view. He's working a job site immediately adjacent to a public parking lot, completely unobstructed view. The building is still being built, and I can see this clown doing everything as he moves throughout the building. Every day, either myself or a colleague go out and get around 10 hours of surveillance on him as he works a full day, lifting, pulling, sawing, all the things he needs to do, never even blinking, let alone showing signs of difficulty. I have video of this guy carrying bundles of metal conduit, extending to do overhead work for long periods of time, carrying large bundles of wire, basically doing every single thing he claims he cannot physically do. The majority of our claims are boring, and the majority of the ones where there's activity that's incompatible with disability we call light fraud. It will never go criminal. These are mostly people who are legitimately injured, but who are milking a disability, either time or severity-wise. A slim number of our cases are this: felony insurance fraud. When I'm not doing my surveillance, I'm meeting with the insurance investigators from the state insurance department. They have arrest authority. Basically, they tell me what they need, they organize it into a nice little case. My company gets paid. Cases like this, done well, basically guarantee me a solid review and raise. Monday morning, I'm sitting at his house, pre-dawn. Today is the big day. I have a subpoena in my hand for his employer. I've had it for a week. I'm just waiting to serve it until they actually arrest this clown. We want the wage records. They keep telling me any day on arresting this dude. I'm getting restless. Around the 15 minutes before he usually goes to work mark, 3 cars speed onto the street. A state trooper, a city cop, and an unmarked Chevy. Chevy pulls up beside me. It's my dude from the insurance department wearing his spiffy windbreaker. He says, "Is he home?" I tell him, "Yeah." He says, "Wait here." I get my camera ready and get some nice video of them walking this crap bag out of his house in handcuffs. Then I go to the job site and serve the subpoena on the employer. They tell me they need a few days to gather the info. I tell them that if I can't walk out with it, I have to call my boy at the insurance department and he will send a state trooper over to just collect all the files and they'll get sorted. Miraculously, payroll files appear. So, where's this stupid cover-up? I know, I dragged this out, but I love this effing story. Thanks for your patience. This is one of those situations where you should probably keep your mouth shut and get a lawyer ASAP. Does he? Nah. He keeps up his track record of questionable judgment. He gives the investigators a sworn statement that he doesn't get paid as an electrician. Says he's just a volunteer. Note that I said sworn statement, as in they had a notary administer an oath before he made the statement, not just a false statement to police. This dude managed to stack perjury on top of his crap sandwich before he even went to trial. Any leverage he had? Gone. By the time he actually got a lawyer, there was nothing left to do. We had video, we had witnesses, we had wage records that directly contradicted his claim of being a volunteer. We had timesheets in his handwriting. We had social media posts of him talking about hard days at work. We had his nuts in a vice. DA offers him a year in jail, 2 at probation, and he pays restitution for the last 3 years of benefits he received. He doesn't want jail time. He doesn't think he should have to repay the insurance company for any of the 6 years he bilked out of them. The offer also comes with not charging him with perjury for the false sworn statement. We go to trial. His lawyer is failing, trying anything he can. Poor dude, he knows this crap is lost. First, he tries to say that our chain of custody is effed because I'm not a peace officer. As this isn't a requirement in the law, argument fails. Then he tries to attack my credibility. I'm on the stand. He breaks out criminal records for someone with a similar name to mine. Are these records for your arrest for submitting a false instrument in perjury? Investigator Vin Bede? I look. No. Dude looks like he's seen a ghost. His response is kind of like that public defender in My Cousin Vinny when he goes after the dude's reading glasses. Flustered, he begins just wildly accusing me of perjury. I point out to the judge that the guy in the records has the same last name and first name as me, but a different middle name, and our DOBs are 20 years off. Then Opie gets on the stand. The DA asks him if he was getting paid or if he was a volunteer. Dumbass says he wasn't getting paid. He was a volunteer, thus committing a fresh act of perjury. When confronted with this, he says to the judge, "What? I'm not going to change my story in court." Deliberations took an hour. I think the jurors mainly dragged it out for the free lunch. Guilty on 1 count of perjury. The sworn statement was changed as some lesser false statement charge in the insurance fraud. Total of 7 years with 3 on probation. Sentences for each charge to be served consecutively. Dude could have just done a year in county and been out. Instead, he ended up serving 7, got his sentence extended by a year when his girlfriend tried to smuggle weed into the prison for him, so 8 years total. Story 45. Dude wrote my law firm a letter from prison asking us to sue a major retailer because their security guard shot him. In the letter, he said that we should check his Facebook or call his mom for the real story, and don't Google. I Googled. Ovs. He apparently stabbed a security guard while stealing a bunch of crap, and the guard shot him. We did not take the case. I bet you're surprised to know that he wanted us to work pro bono. You know, some of these stories seem like they'd be better reserved for a sitcom. It's hard to believe that someone would actually say, "Hey, I need you to help me out, but just don't Google my name, man. Whatever you do, don't Google. I swear, anything that you might find on the internet is not true." I mean, it's like this. This just doesn't even seem real, but of course it is. I believe you, OP. Story 46. Someone explained to me that logic behind car chases. We always see them on occasion, how some gangsters flee in a car. What's their reasoning? That they can escape/outrun police cars and helicopters? That the cops will just give up at some point? Or what we know from the movies, they just need to reach another state because then the cops can't further pursue? Or those who are running from the cops in a car chase simply just stupid? Story 47. Let's see. If you're in jail for robbery, don't give one of the jail deputies a script and ask him to make a call to coordinate the intimidation of the victim. Don't go to probation with fake urine for your drug screen. They will find out. And when you're detained for that violation, they'll find the fentanyl that's in your anus. Especially don't do any of this when a violation of your probation will land you in prison for a very long time. If you plan to testify to a grand jury or a trial jury, make sure that your story is logical. You're not as smart as you think you are. If you wake up in jail with your eyes burning, it's not logical that you wouldn't ask why you were in jail or request medical treatment. In that case, the jury said the case wasn't proven beyond a reasonable doubt until after the defendant gave his cockamamie story. Found out after, he'd tested a few different stories on the deputy guarding him in the courtroom. Story 48. A guy in my hometown threw a party when we were 16 and it got out of control. Holes in the wall, people stealing stuff, doors ripped off the hinges, etc. I guess in his drunken, my parents are going to kill me state of mind, he decided it would make more sense to just burn the house down. So he set his parents' house on fire and it burned to the ground. His parents had to have him charged so they could claim insurance. I'm not speaking from an area of expertise here and certainly not experience, but I'm pretty sure that arson is a far worse charge than just standard destruction of property. And with it being at your parents' house, you just ruined your life, buddy. Story 49. Client Bruce is on trial for armed robbery of a liquor store. Bruce has a terrible prior record, so cannot take the witness stand. Or most of that will be revealed to the jury. The robber was wearing a black ski mask, and it's hard to ID Bruce as the robber. However, the liquor store owner testifies that the robber had a big diamond on the pinky finger of his right hand. Bruce has such a pinky ring and, in full view of the jury, promptly sweeps his right hand from the top of the defense table to under it and turns to me in his chair. Bruce is extremely agitated and tells me, "I want to testify. That mother effer is lying." Me. "Well, what do you want to testify to, Bruce?" Bruce. "I want to tell them he's a damn liar. He couldn't see my ring. I was wearing gloves." Bruce followed my advice, but was convicted nonetheless. Story 50. Knew a guy who was doing a pretty respectable shroom business, in addition to a pretty decent tech job as well. Guy was actually really smart, and I think he thought he was too smart. What he didn't know was his roommate's girlfriend had a parole officer. PO stops by the house to do their check on the parolee and stumbles upon his shroom operation, with a few guns thrown into the mix for good measure. Well, his $100K a year job was toast at that point, and he was off for some time with the state. Last I knew, he was out of prison and driving a cab. Story 51. Can I add one where we thought a client was doing this only they weren't? We got a woman who was denied Medicaid because they said she'd filed a previous application with 2/3 of the information different from the current one. Her basic defense is, "That wasn't me, it's a different person." Like, okay, I've never heard that one before, but we're thorough, so we're at least going to look. Turns out it's a good thing we did, because she was actually telling the truth. The agency saw that she had the same first and last name and a similar birthday as a previous applicant and just decided they were the same person. The worst part was, the agency actually made us take it to a hearing, and throughout the entire hearing, they kept insisting this was the same person and their confusion was her fault. Although it was really satisfying reading the ALJ's decision, she was not happy with their handling of things and she let them know it. I mean, can you blame her? False accusations, even though there is a person out there with very similar attributes, name and birthday and so forth. It's like, what happened to innocent till proven guilty? I don't blame her one bit for being pissed. Story 52. It's not quite the same as a cop story, but I know somebody who works security for a port. My dad also manages part of one, so I could ask him for any stories like this now that I think about it. Anyway, they were checking shipping containers after a weight anomaly checking packages before craning, and they opened one big container to find there were stowaways stowaways, illegal immigrants in there. Rather than try and hide in the back or stuff inside packaging, they decided the best idea was to hold some of the products and just lay still. When directly shown on and questioned by security, they insisted that they were part of the packaging and that the shipping company had put them inside for the whole journey to keep the cargo steady by holding it still by hand. It didn't work, and the story did not check out. Story 53. Not a cover-up, and I'm not a lawyer or cop, but when I was a Marine, I had to retrieve a kid from the brig who had pulled a knife on his team leader before disappearing over the weekend when our battalion was on liberty. He wandered around LA for a few days, living like a homeless guy with 8 knives in his backpack. Anyway, Monday rolled around and he took a train to Oceanside, walked into base, and quickly determined that he wouldn't make it back to our part of base before he was declared UA, unauthorized absence. In a blind panic, he noticed a MP car, military police, parked on the side of the road, and he walked up to it, pulled out a knife, and told the MP he needed him to take him to the north end of base now. MP pulls a gun. Kid goes to the brig. I listened in amazement and asked the kid, "Did you ever consider that the cop was sitting on the side of the road because he had nothing better to do? If you had asked nicely, he would have driven you there, or at least called your command so you wouldn't have been in trouble." Kid sullenly goes, "I just wasn't thinking, Sergeant." Thing is, the team leader he originally pulled the knife on was drunk and hazing the kid, so he would have not been in trouble at all for his original actions. Pulling a knife on a cop, though? Just jeez. Story 54. Police here. Guy was insanely drunk. .32, I believe. I stopped him from making a left turn out of a bar, which put him going northbound in a southbound lane of a pretty large roadway, and the road was divided by a median. So he drives over the median at full speed, and his Land Rover kinda-ish gets airborne. Gets pulled over. He decides to consent to blowing into a field Alco sensor, and it reads a .5 BAC and then gets an error/shuts off, which I assume is its max reading because a normal person is probably dead here. Dude used alcohol-based mouthwash to beat the alcohol sensor. He was still a .3+, which is impressive because normal people can't function right at this point. He only seemed drunk and not wasted and vomit-covered like a normal person would be. Story 55. Neither lawyer nor cop here, but studying executive law. One of my professors told us a story about one of those guys he encountered at his lawyer time. Young drug dealer caught by police. He tried to throw away the stuff he had placed in little bags. By throwing, I mean he was literally just throwing them over his shoulder, not far away from him, so he can find them again later. Well, bad luck for this guy. He forgot he was wearing a hoodie, so the small bags all landed in his hoodie cap thingy. Needless to say, the police had an easy job there, and so did my professor. Story 56. Former jury member here had a case where a guy robbed a travel agent. Red flag right there. Travel agents don't really hold a lot of cash. He claimed that the guys with him kidnapped him and forced him to do it, although he was wearing a balaclava and they weren't. Anyway, failing to find any cash on the ground floor, they spotted a staircase leading down to a basement and thought there might be a safe down there, so went downstairs. Of course, instead of that, there were a whole bunch of travel agents on the phone to the cops. Cue a hurry for the exit, although not before he stole the purse from a lady's handbag. Unfortunately, he's not very bright. He runs around the corner to a bus stop where he promptly stops and waits for a bus. Police pick him up at the bus stop with purse in one pocket and balaclava in the other. Still claims he's been kidnapped. Not sure anyone in the room believed him. Story 57. Police officer here, not exactly covering up a crime, but still a good story anyway. About 15 years ago, we get a call for a burglary. The perp gained access via breaking a window on the fire escape and climbing into the apartment. So while we're looking around and talking to the complainant, I check behind the dresser near the window, and lo and behold, there on the floor is a wallet. We pick up the wallet, and inside is a driver's license from a dude that lives across the street. The owner says he has no idea who the guy is, never seen him before. Anyway, the apartment owner says he only owns one item of any value and it's missing. It's a 7-inch solid gold Jesus on the cross, on a gold chain with emerald eyes and the word forgiven in rubies on the bottom. Pretty specific custom-made item. Guy had Polaroids of him wearing it to parties and whatnot. This was before smartphones. So the three of us walk across the street to the address indicated on the license and knock on the door. Well, the guy opens the door, wearing the stolen golden Jesus around his neck, and he looks at us and says, "Yes, can I help you gentlemen with something?" A few months after the arrest and conviction, the owner of the chain comes into the PCT, wearing his coveted gold chain with a few pizzas for the tour to thank us for getting his prize chain back. Stupid criminals indeed. Story 58. I worked third shift, police dispatch for a few years. One night, a man with active warrant sees a cop sitting in his patrol car as he drives past him. This apparently makes him super nervous, and he inexplicably thinks he needs to make a run for it, even though, in reality, the officer had not pulled out to follow him and was 100% unaware of this guy's warrants. The doofus speeds up, turns off his lights, and makes a quick turn to evade a pursuit that wasn't even happening. This catches the officer's attention, and he pulls out to follow. The guy speeds up even more and tries to trick the distantly trailing officer by cutting through a yard and driving to a street to block over. He somehow loses control, probably because he was speeding with his lights off in a yard, and crashes through the wall of a house. He instantly turned a couple of FTA warrants into much more serious charges. The best part? The house he hit was the judge's house. It's still hard to fully comprehend how hard this idiot screwed himself that evening. Story 59. Not a lawyer/LEO, but managed a retail location with one of those self-service coin counters. It was not uncommon to get requests from police to look at surveillance video for various cases. One day, a fire captain comes in, tells me about a case of stolen coins he's working on. Apparently, a group of friends was breaking into houses and cashing in coin collections at the coin counter for pennies on the dollar of what they're worth. Stupid number one. Curiosity got the better of me, and I asked why a fire captain was investigating. To cover their tracks, the kids were lighting the houses on fire. Went from minor burglaries to arson. Stupid number two. Went to the pre-trial for one. His parents seemed like decent people. Never heard how long they got, but all were caught. Story 60. Not a lawyer, but my story. Got real drunk with some friends down by the river and golf course. By around 4 a.m., we're walking back, and what do we see but 4 golf carts with the keys? We start racing them. Turns out the greenkeeper was there and joins in with his pickup. Now, if we had been sober or even vaguely intelligent, we would have stopped. But one friend was not getting caught and tried to flee to the river, tearing down over one of the wet greens, over the hill and into the river. He went from us getting a good shouting at to a criminal charge, theft, vandalism, DUI, and resisting arrest. Upside was we all got interviewed drunk and the case got dropped on that. We all admitted it. Police felt 4 confessions and 1 witness meant no need for extra evidence. The judge saw 4 statements given under the influence as not admissible when he had 4 teenagers looking at driving bans and jail time over an obvious juvenile incident gone wrong. This story is why I stopped drinking and went to college. Story 61. In high school, friends and I were hanging out, smoking weed and doing other dumb stuff. One friend gets a call from his mom. We can hear her screaming at him from his phone. His responses were hilarious. Friend goes, "Mom, did you find the adult content?" Mom, "What? No. Get home now." Friend, "Did you find the alcohol?" Mom, "What alcohol? You have alcohol? Your dad and I want you home this minute." Friend, exasperated, "Okay, fine. Mom, just tell me, did you find the pot?" Now, father, mother weeping in the background, "Son, you need to come home. Your mother and I found your stash of cigarettes and cigars." He never lived this down. Story 62. Not a cop or a lawyer, but I think this might count. So, my freshman year of college, my roommate and I were hanging out with Kay, who was our neighbor in the dorm, and a few of his friends. There was 6 of us total, and we were all under 21. We were drinking 2 bottles of liquor, 1 K's, and 1 mine and my roommate's, and playing beer pong. One of the guys, we'll call him Q, was being super loud and playing music super loud. We kept telling him to quit because we didn't want the RAs to show up. Q doesn't stop, and of course the RAs show up because of a noise complaint. I was the one that realized who was at the door and told them to pour the alcohol down the drain, while I stalled the RAs. I'm opening the door to talk to the RAs when Q very loudly says he isn't getting caught with alcohol and locks himself in the bathroom, preventing us from getting rid of the booze. The RAs hear him, of course, and have no choice but to call campus police. So the cops come and start searching. Thankfully, my roommate was a effing legend and hid our bottle under the covers of Kay's bed when Q was being a dumbass saving us from trouble. However, Q wasn't so lucky. When the cops came, they quickly realized he was holed up in the bathroom and asked him to come out. He refused, which made him look super suspicious. Unfortunately for Q, the dorm keeps a master key for all dorm rooms. So the RAs got said key and unlocked the bathroom door. The cops enter the bathroom and a few seconds later start laughing. When he barricaded himself in the bathroom, Q had taken K's liquor with him. Normally, this would have been a good thing, but being the effing idiot that he was, Q had downed the entire fifth of liquor instead of pouring it down the drain. He was only in there for about 20 minutes, which isn't much time to rapidly consume an almost full fifth of liquor. So as soon as the cops open the door, Q tries to stand up and run past them, which, in his inebriated state, results in him falling face first on the floor. He then stands up and takes a very uncoordinated, missed swing at one of the officers, which results in him falling again. After the cops stop laughing at his pathetic escape attempts, they handcuff him and take him downtown, where he's charged with a MIP and assaulting an officer. His dumbassery saved the rest of us, which I guess I'm thankful for, but I can't help but pity Q for the level of stupidity that he exhibited. Story 63. Not really cover-ups, but trying to get away with a crime. I was a prosecutor on the case of Cuyahoga County about 10 years ago. We used to have to read the police reports to defense counsel. It was a total waste of time, but that's what the big boss wanted us to do. I had a case with a charge of F5 possession for crack. Guy had a small rock. Cases like this usually plea, and unless you've got a significant record, it's usually probation and time served. So according to the report, the defendant goes into a convenience store in suburban Cleveland and is under the influence of something. He's acting cagey, so the clerk keeps an eye on him. Well, he shoplifts something. I waited to tell the defense counsel that he stole for dramatic effect. The clerk confronts him and they tussle. Right there, I see another potential charge for robbery. Defendant gets away and jumps in his car. Police are called and pursue. He takes him on a high-speed chase. Another potential charge for fleeing and eluding. He would be looking at serious time for these charges had the case been indicted with all charges. Well, being under the influence of something didn't help his driving skills and he wrecks. In a search of the wrecked vehicle, they find a tiny little crack rock. The defense attorney starts telling me that no way his client knew the rock was there and I should prepare to go to trial, etc. At that point, I tell him that his client stole Chore Boy, a metallic cleaning scrubber that's commonly used to hold crack rocks and pipes. It's the crack equivalent of having rolling papers. His lawyer shook his head and said he'd go talk to his client about pleading to the F5. In another case, CPD Vice Unit was doing a prostitution sting. Undercover was playing the part of the prostitute. If convicted, the guy would be looking at probation. Guy pulls up, deal made, and supporting units converge. Defendant panics, tries driving away, and hits multiple police cars, and an officer was dragged while hanging onto the window. So he went from a soliciting charge to multiple counts of felonious assault on a police officer, which at the time was 3 to 10 years in prison. While arresting him, he had a couple small crack rocks on him.